Torchbearers of History, a connected series of historical sketches, Volume 1, From the Earliest Times to the Reformation, by Amelia, Hutchinson, Stirling. Chapter 5. Regulus, the Rise of Rome, the Punic Wars. As yet I have told you nothing of any people save those who lived in the eastern peninsula of southern Europe. But now we are going to follow the course of history and pass over into the central peninsula, Italy, where I shall introduce you to the people no less great and wonderful than the Greeks. I mean the Romans. It is generally supposed that Rome was built in 753 BC, about 250 years after Homer lived, but that it is really not known for certain. We do know, however, that even before the Persian Wars, in which the Greeks so nobly won their freedom, the Romans had shown no less plenty than the Greeks, though not in such a glorious way. Their hatred of tyranny and their love of liberty. It was in 510 BC that the Romans banished their king, Tarquinius, who had been a cruel tyrant, and resolved that there would never be ruled over by another king. Tarquinius got a powerful chief to help him, and marched against Rome, with a great many men, thinking he would force the people to make him their king again. But the Romans went out against him, and drove him back. There was never another king of Rome, and no single man ruled over the people, except in time of war, for many centuries. I have said that the Romans were not less great than the Greeks, but that they were very different from them. They had not the Greek love of beauty and the Greek power of creating beautiful things. They were not naturally poets and artists. They were soldiers, statesmen, and lawyers. If they could not carve beautiful statues and rear noble temples like the Greeks, they could at least frame laws, which, after all these centuries, still live and are in force today in countries very far distant from Rome, countries which the old Romans did not even know exist. No doubt it was largely due to those excellent laws that Rome grew daily in strength and in greatness, until at last her rule extended over the whole known world. But I think that another important cause of this was the fact that the freedom, the prosperity of the state of Rome formed the ideal of every worthy Roman citizen. Do you know what I mean by the ideal? It is something to be lived for and up to, something which has nothing to do with ourselves and our pleasures, our likings and dislikings, something which we would give all that we have and are to reach, our fortune and friends, our life and liberty. That is what the freedom and the greatness of Rome were to every good citizen at the time. I am going to tell you of the Regulus, when the Regulus lived. The little Roman boys, while they were still at their mother's knees, were taught that they must always put the state before anything else, before father and mother and self, and when they grew up they did not forget these lessons. They lived simply, ate plain food, and wore coarse clothes, and kept themselves always practiced in arms, so that they were ready to fight whenever their country needed them, ready to lay down their lives and all that they had for sake of their ideal. Thus Rome grew in strength and greatness day by day, till at last the people who had grown up in what was at first a little mud-built town overlooking the Tiber became the greatest, the only power in the world. Then they fell, but not till they had lost their ideal, till they had become proud and haughty, caring for nothing but ease and luxury. That, however, was not till long, very long, after the time I am going to speak of now. Though, as I have said, Rome is supposed to have been built in the 8th century BC, it was not till several centuries afterwards, Not till the 3rd century BC, the Romans became one of the most important powers in Europe. At the time when the Greeks were deciding the fate of Europe at Marathon and at Salamis, and afterwards when Alexander the Great was gaining his brilliant victories in Asia, the Romans were preparing themselves for future greatness by strengthening their city, making their laws, and conquering the other people of Italy. By the middle of the 3rd century BC, when the Regulus lived, they had made themselves masters of all Italy. And it was then that the wars began, which made Rome take a foremost place in the history of Europe. I mean the Punic Wars, the 4th of the great wars of Europe. On the north coast of Africa, and the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, just opposite the island of Sicily, there stood, at the time of which I am going to tell you, and for many centuries before, the city of Carthage. In the 3rd century BC, the city had become great and wealthy, and had conquered by means of its powerful fleet parts of the coast of Spain and several islands of the Mediterranean, Corsica and the Balearic Islands, and a large part of Sicily. It was in Sicily that the Romans first came forward as the enemy of Carthage, and that the Punic Wars began. The name is derived from Puni, the Latin name for Carthaginians, who were of Phoenician origin, and is applied to the wars between Rome and Carthage, which lasted for several years, and ended with the complete destruction of Carthage. I am not going to tell you here the excuse which the Romans made use for beginning the wars, but I think the real cause of the wars was that the Romans, after having conquered all Italy, wanted to conquer Sicily too, and to put down Carthaginians, of whom, no doubt, they were jealous. Whatever was the true cause, the Romans sent an army into Sicily, and laid siege to several towns held by Carthage, some of which they conquered, after fighting in Sicily for some years, sometimes winning and sometimes losing. They resolved to attack Carthage itself. So, in 256 BC, they got together a great fleet, which they sent to Africa under the command of Regulus and another general. Now Regulus was a very able general, and won some brilliant victories over the Carthaginians, but it is not his skill as a general that has made him famous even to our own day. If he had always been victorious, I don't think I should have cared to tell you about him at all. It was when he conquered, but when he was defeated, that he showed how very great he was. He was a true Roman citizen, perhaps the noblest citizen that Rome ever had. And, as I told you, the freedom and prosperity of Rome were the ideal of every true Roman. They were certainly the ideal of Regulus, a stern, simple, upright man, loving his country with all his heart. He was always ready to do whatever Rome bade him without asking why, always ready to sacrifice self and life and liberty in her service. So when he was ordered to take the command of the fleet and sail over to Carthage, he obeyed without hesitation. At first he was very successful. Just off the south coast of Sicily, he met the Carthaginian fleet, which, although it was much larger than the Roman one, he completely defeated. Then he sailed to Africa, where he landed and won several victories. But at last the Carthaginians got the help of the great Greek general, who added to the army, trained the men thoroughly, and then led them out against the Romans. The Roman army was completely scattered, and Regulus himself was taken prisoner. He remained prisoner for several years, while the war between Carthage and Rome still went on. Cannot you fancy how terrible those years of idleness and captivity in the strange lands must have been for a brave and active soldier, for the loving father who had a wife and children at home in his beloved Rome? How bitter must it have been, the thought that he could do nothing to help his country in her struggle. How eagerly he must have listened for every scrap of news about the war, hoping day after day that his countrymen would come victorious to Carthage, and set him free. Free to see again his dear wife and his little ones, free to fight once more for Rome, which was dearer to him even than they. At last, after 5 or 6 years, the time came when he might be free. The Romans had gained a great many victories in Sicily, and the Carthaginians resolved to send ambassadors to Rome to ask for peace, or for an exchange of prisoners. Along with the ambassadors they sent Regulus, after making him take his oath that, if the Romans did not agree to their terms, he would come back to Carthage. They thought that, when Regulus knew that his own liberty and perhaps his life depended upon it, he would be sure to persuade the Romans to accept the terms offered. But they did not know the power of the Roman ideal in the heart of a true Roman citizen. Well, when on reaching Rome, the Carthaginian ambassadors and Regulus were brought before the Senate, the body of men who made the laws for Rome, as our houses of Parliament do for our country. When the ambassadors had delivered the message they had brought the Senate dismissed them, but Regulus they bade remain. Then they asked him for his advice. Did he, knowing the condition of both states and both armies, think it well for Rome to accept the terms offered? Now Regulus knew that on his answer depended his life. But he did not pause for that. I am sure he did not pause one moment. In a clear, firm voice he answered, "No, refuse." And then he explained so clearly the reasons why it was better for Rome to refuse the terms offered by Carthage than the senators saw that they must refuse. But they said that Regulus must not go back to Carthage, where no doubt he would be put to death. He should stay with his own countrymen, and the high priest should free him from his oath. But Regulus said, "Not so. I have taken my oath, and I will fulfill it. To break an oath is sinful, and brings the anger of the gods. I will not bring anger of the gods upon Rome, upon my country." And he remained firm in his resolve. His friends argued with him, and tried to persuade him to break his vow, but in vain. His wife clung weeping around his neck, and his little ones clasped his knees as they cried aloud. But he tore himself away from them, away from Rome, and was true to his vow. When he reached Carthage, the people of the city, in anger that the embassy had failed, put him to death by slow torture.